Welcome to the Book of Chronicles. Now, before we get started, a quick word about plagiarism. Don't do it. Unless you are the biblical author of the Book of Chronicles. Unless you are the chronicler, that's what we're going to call him, the chronicler himself. Because the chronicler plagiarized a full 50% of his book. Ripped it right out of Samuel and Kings. The chronicler is going to tell the story of David in 1 Chronicles 10 to 29, and he's going to take that right out of 1 Samuel 8 to 15 and all of 2 Samuel. And then when the chronicler is going to tell the story of Solomon, well, he's going to borrow liberally from 1 Kings 1 to 10. And then jumping over when he's telling the story of the kings of Judah in 2 Chronicles 10 to 36, well, he's like, where else would I borrow from than from 1 Kings 12 to 2 Kings 25. And then finally, in the chronicler's conclusion here at the latter part of chapter 36, well, he's just going to open up his little book of Ezra and copy right from Ezra chapter 1. What's going on here? Why would the chronicler plagiarize like this? Well, when the chronicler sat down to write his book, clearly he had on a table spread out before him the scroll of Samuel and Kings. He had Samuel and Kings right there before him. And if we're going to crawl inside of the mind of the chronicler, figure out what he was thinking, we have to ask three questions. When he had these two books spread out before him, what did the chronicler add to his sources? What did the chronicler remove from his sources? And finally, what did the chronicler change in Samuel and Kings? Now let me show you a little chart that kind of is a cheat sheet for us and helps us answer these questions. So here is, zoom out just a hair for a minute, it's a list of all of the events in Chronicles and then their parallel in either 2 Samuel or 1st or 2nd Kings. Zoom in a little bit here, we see that the events recorded that are just in this column, the chronicler did not record, and there's a few events in this column which only the chronicler recorded, but then these events here are recorded in both. This is the 50% plagiarism aspect of the book of Chronicles. And that's kind of a micro level of the chronicler's adaptation of Samuel and Kings. What about the macro level? So what did the chronicler, let's start with, what did the chronicler remove? Well, here in 2 Chronicles 10 to 36, it tells the story of the kings of Judah, and it completely leaves out the northern tribes. Northern kingdom. So this is kind of like a little stitch of clothing or something like that, and the chronicler's going to rip that out. We don't need that. We're not going to tell the story of the northern kingdom. Why? Well, the chronicler's interest is definitely going to be in Judah, but really, kind of at a macro level, the book of Kings, we'll just use this right here. The book of Kings is telling a word of judgment. So while the book of Kings is telling a word of, there we go. The chronicler, he's adapting that story to tell a word of hope. And it's a hope which is going to center in David and the Davidic covenant. So that's what the chronicler removed, or at least one aspect. What did he add to his work from Samuel and Kings? Well, he's going to add 9 chapters of sleepy genealogy to the very beginning of his book, and that's going to be his introduction. Now, when you're taking a class on preaching and someone says you have to have a hook that really grabs one's attention at the beginning of your sermon, I think the chronicler missed that lesson because he starts with 9 chapters of genealogy. The genealogy, however, does have a pretty interesting design, kind of a chiastic design. It starts in chapter 1, tracing ancient history, starting with Adam all the way down to Jacob, or Israel as he's named. And then at the end, in chapter 9, it's going to look at the post-exilic community. So ancient history down to the present day, in the chronicler's day. And then come in one level, it's going to trace the line of Judah and specifically look at the lineage of David. And then in another level, here's another royal line, the lines of Benjamin, specifically looking at Saul, whose story is going to be told here in chapter 10 very briefly. And then in another level, it's going to look at the 10 tribes, the Transjordan tribes here who lived east of the Jordan, Gad, Reuben, and the half tribe of Manasseh, and then the other tribes here. And then at the very center of his genealogy, I think it's in chapter 6, it focuses on Levi, and specifically the line of the high priest, the line of Aaron. Let's have a little conversation with our chronicler. So, what were you doing there, buddy, with this whole genealogy? I think we can learn a few things from this genealogy. First off, the chronicler's history is going to be relevant for all of humanity. It starts with Adam, but his message is going to be carried forward through the post-exilic community that he's writing to, his own contemporaries. He's also, we know from this introduction, he's going to be interested specifically in 2 tribes, the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Levi. Now, the tribe of Judah, that's the tribe of the kings and the kingdom. And the tribe of Levi, well, that's the tribe of the priests and of the temple. 2 central concerns, kingdom and temple. But for the chronicler, the kingdom of Israel must include all 12 tribes reunited in the land. And as we go forward and we look at the reigns of David and Solomon and then the rest of the kings of Judah, we're going to pay attention to these themes and see how the chronicler works them out in the rest of his work.